Hi everyone. Today we're talking about or revisiting or reviewing Power of Parenthood, which is session 6 in the manual Power of Godly Character. So I'm here with Jared, and just for the sake of what you just said, just recapping what we said before we come online. Um, it really is quite funny. I mean, for me, I was 40. Well, it's not funny, but I was 41 before I became, or 42. The year I turned 42 is the year I become a follower of Jesus. I had no church upbringing, no Christian values. They were pretty godless. So when we talk about the power of parenthood, and when we wrote this, and it's like yourself, and it's like you just look back and think, man, did I make a mess of that?
Mm.
So what were you saying yourself? What did you say to me earlier? For the benefit of others, just repeat it.
Well, I've got a big family, as you know. I've got five sons and five daughters, but I really have to cut them a bit of slack because, um, yeah, right. I got my own act to clean up, but we can't be too critical on the young. We can only guide them. But I think I said, uh, uh, yeah, if I had another crack at it now, I wonder how it'd turn out. But everything is so different in the secular world, but the spiritual world's there still for them to find if they haven't found it. God's there
Yeah,
waiting for them.
yeah, and you're right. And when we wrote this, I mean, this whole module, Power of Godly Character, this is life changing. This is how we live life according to the Bible. So this session and the next ones, they're all being designed, about the family unit, purity, integrity, children,
Yes.
adulthood, marriage, the whole lot. And and this is the one that brings conviction to people. But it's also important that it doesn't bring condemnation, because God's not a God with a big stick up there wanting to beat us all up because of the mistakes we made, especially when we weren't followers of Jesus as well. And so we knew that this would bring conviction to people. And just like your opening remarks when we first said good morning, is that life would be very different if we knew this beforehand, and or what we're teaching in here. So the important part with this, Jared, and these topics, and those that are going to listen to these videos later on, is when we designed these, we had to keep the imagery of where you were in the timeline. Now, if you look at us, we're at the end, further down the end than we are at the start. So it's been
Yeah.
designed that wherever you were in the time, where are you in the timeline, you can go back and reflect and repent of the stuff that silly things you did, or out of ignorance,
Yeah.
or not having a biblical worldview. And we deal with that in Encounter Weekend, right? Encounter Weekend is specifically around a lot of these topics we're going to cover now to get right with God. And so the other part is, for someone that's young, that's a teenager, they can address the things that they make sure they don't make the mistakes, because they can go on the future, and we're giving them the railroad tracks of what the Bible says of how to live life to the fullest, how to be good parents, how to
Yep.
be a good dad, how to be a good mum, how to raise your children, how to, what God thinks about kids. And also for teenagers, you pay the price if you go off the rails, but here's how God meant you to live as a teenager. So we've covered it in every
Mm.
aspect. What it is for you and I, we're looking back on our past, and the only thing that we can do is basically repent and then teach a younger generation,
Cut
hey,
them a bit
don't
of
do what
slack.
we did. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Cut them a bit of slack, but also that expression, there go I, but for the grace of God. But it's
Mm.
also to teach them, hey, don't make the mistakes we made. Here's what the
Mm.
Bible says. And when we look at this, and I keep saying this, this is a book of life. It's not a book of rules. It's a book of
Absolutely.
life, how to live life to the maximum. So what we're doing in this course is unpacking this, how to live life to the maximum benefit as a teenager, as an adult, as a parent, as a husband, as a wife, or whatever. It's a fantastic manufacturer's handbook for human beings. All we've done is unlocked it for people to follow. So anyway, so
exactly.
let's go. Let's go. You got any comments there you want to make?
Yeah, yeah. I just think with the kids, with the children, do as I say, not as I did.
And certainly in this case, that certainly applies. I have a policy: do as I do, not do as I say. But in the case of this, that is certainly very relevant. Do as I say, don't do as I did.
Well,
It's very
you
relevant, isn't it?
can't put the whole head on the young shoulders, as the saying goes. But just by the grace of God, they'll, you know, it's like the railway tracks. It's there whether the train runs off it or not. It's just getting them back on it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the thing is, there's a failing in Western society, which in developing countries, or I don't like using the term third world countries because that's not a good expression, but it'll help people understand. When you look at a lot of these developing countries, they respect the elders. We in Western society, and if I use America, Australia, New Zealand,
Yep.
British, whatever, we in general don't respect the elders. But God's designed it that the elders are there to be respected and to pass on the wisdom and the knowledge they've learned to minimize the mistakes that younger generations coming up. That's our role. At our age now, that really is our role in life, is to be able to impart into the younger ones, the wisdom and the knowledge to accelerate them because, wisdom only comes through years of experience and hardship and mistakes and stuff up. So we can look back for people and say, hey, don't do that because I did that. This is the result it had.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's very, 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 very important. Let's look at some of these questions, Jared. The question one is, what have you learned from Psalm 127, verse 3? And it should be about 182, 184 in your book. So what is that saying to you? Psalm 127:3.
Well, 123.
Yeah, it should be pages 182, 80, 182, 83.
Yeah. Well, it's how do we see the children? The children are God's gift to the parents,
Yep.
and uh, and they're God entrusts the children to the parents.
Yep.
The parents are the fortunes of his heirs. His heirs to carry on. But
Yeah. And when you look at it, society, there's a lot of worldview in society that views children as a nuisance, but that's not how God sees it. When you read that Psalm 127, 3-5, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward, like arrows in the hands of a warrior. So are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who, you're a blessed man to have 10 children.
I am a blessed
And
man,
that's,
and I lost my wife 14 years ago, and I think she was a wonderful woman to bear, 10 children, and I really think she done the work of God, and I'm quite confident where she is now, looking down on us, our children, me, everyone, and guiding our ways after she's gone
yeah,
from this earth.
yeah. Well, it's interesting.
So
I
I'm
don't know
very
the
blessed.
exact verse, but it talks about a cloud of witnesses. So if your wife had accepted, God or the Lord accepted Jesus, that she's sitting in heaven as part of the cloud of witnesses looking down on us. It's
Yes.
actually interesting. I don't know the exact verse, but it talks about the cloud of witnesses looking
Okay.
down on us, cheering us on. So you can just Google it. If you just Google it and type in cloud of witnesses, the verse will come up. I was just looking at the first page here, which is really one of my favorite parts of the book, the Bible, Psalm 139 verses 13-16, where David was talking about how God formed him in my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. And the fact that, the verse 16, yet your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned before me, when as yet there were none. I just love that verse that
Yes.
God sat up there, like, for want of a better expression, with a big pencil and a pen and wrote out, wow, this is the dream I've got for Jared. This is the dream I've got for Carl, or
Yep.
whoever we're talking to, and wrote his dream and plan and destiny for us. And it's such an exciting concept when, the world view in its humanistic way is, we're a mistake or whatever. That's a lie out of the pit of hell. God
Yeah.
dreamt creating us, and
Mm.
dreamt the day when we would come on
The
earth and walk
plan.
on
Yep.
earth. And it's
Yep.
just such a powerful verse, and so contradicting to what evilness or the kingdom of darkness wants to lay on people. You're hopeless, you're useless, you're this, you're that.
Yep.
That's not God's dream or plan. That's the devil's plan, but it's not God's plan in this. That
Mm.
he had a dream, he wrote it in a book in heaven. And every
Well,
person on earth, he wrote a dream and a plan for.
well, it
And
says,
God
yeah,
doesn't make God
not
doesn't
only
make
that,
junk.
but sorry, Carl. Not only that, but God has already planned our eternal destiny and written in his book the number of days assigned for us on earth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's got the trigger. We know not the day or the hour, but he does.
Yeah. And but all that he put, that's part of, that's all part of it as well. But for me, the highlight is that the dream, the plan, the vision that he
Yes.
had for us, is
Mm.
that God is love. We make that in, really reinforce that in the first module. But he loved us so much, the cliche that every Christian uses, I'm not underplaying it. He loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us, to be able to bring us back in a relationship with him. I mean, the sacrifice, you think of the sacrifice of one of your children. He sacrificed his child, his only child, for us. And there's a
Mm.
story on that. People can read that in
Yes.
module 1, laying the foundation, with the full story there. But the point I'm making is I'm overlaying it with the book he's written in heaven. If you think, Jared, of what God's asking you to do now in the political arena, he wrote
Mm.
that in the book. He put
Yes.
that in his book in heaven to challenge that political arena. So it's not as though it's a big surprise for him or you're wandering off it. He's put that plan and purpose in your life, and in Derek's life as well, to be able to challenge that political system. That's a corrupt system. He's done that. He's wrote that in the book. So you're knowing that you're in God's will. Anyway, I'm wandering
Well,
off a bit, but I think it's just fantastic that Psalm 139, that every
it
day,
is.
the dream that he had was written in the book. And
Yeah.
so then also that comes back, if we tie that in with these verses here, in Psalm 127, verses 3 to 5, it was his dream for you to have those children.
Yeah.
Now in society today, it's about 1.5 children, I think, per person or per couple in Western society. In fact, some people are so afraid they don't want to have children because
Mm.
of what's happening in society. Not necessarily Christians. Anyone that's abiding and understands their relationship with God shouldn't be afraid to have children. But in a godless society, they're afraid to have children. But it was God's dream to have that. So it was his dream for you to have those 10 children.
Mm.
It
Yep.
wasn't an accident or
I'm blessed.
whatever.
No.
Yeah, it's blessed in that. And that's just
Well,
what he's saying.
I was blessed to meet someone that had that vision as well in her, being my wife.
Yeah, because that's very unusual. It wasn't in my parents' day. I mean, for us, what was there, 4 children in our family? But my parents on my dad's side, there was 12, I think 12 or 13. I think it was
Yeah.
12 children, and that was common in that era.
Mm.
But now it's apart from your developing countries, it's very unusual in Western world, to
Mm.
have it, to do that. But it's really interesting coming along there, that kingdom, the kingdom dynamics on Psalm 127:3. Loving and caring for children honors God.
Mm.
So, by what you did, like, and it's the comment there, God gives children to parents as a man entrusts his fortunes to his heirs. So,
Yeah.
to love and care for children is one of the principal ways that we honor God and share in building his kingdom. Very
Yeah.
powerful.
Well, I feel totally honoured myself and blessed.
Yeah. So question 2 is, what have you learnt about raising children? This should be pages 184 to 187.
Well, God trusts his children to the parents, and like you
Yeah.
just said, it honours God.
Yep. So what about there under the heading? We'll just go by page. So it'll just help for it, because I don't have a disciples manual here to get the exact page numbers. So I think it's really interesting that under the heading there, how a child sees parents. See the heading there, how a child sees parents?
Yes.
It'll be just
Well,
after what we had.
yeah, you're the young child, like there's nothing better than the young, you come home from work and the little kids come out and, they just love their father and their mother, and they've probably been with their mum all day, but dad's away. I don't think there's any better feeling. And, the love, the natural love that you've got for them and they've got for you, then, as the child grows older, we have to encourage them and not be destructive in how we speak to them.
Yep.
But
also, that's right.
Listen to them, encourage them, but also, and I think that comes on later on, discipline them, but we're not to provoke them.
That's right.
The world does that for us anyway. That like the systems that are in place are anti-family.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got to guard against it,
That's right. So if we have a look at that under the heading, how a child sees parents, so you've got the guy there with his daughter covered.
Yeah.
Is that
a beautiful picture?
The expression now, I'm going to read it out for the benefit of our listeners.
Yes.
A child naturally sees his parents as God with skin on. God designed it that way. Parents express love to their child, and the child naturally responds with love in return. In this way, parents reflect God's love to their children. And this is the key. And children naturally copy the way their parents speak and act. That's a bit scary if you're coming from a godless point of view in it. They will imitate what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's probably an explanation why some of my boys have got colourful language.
It is. Yeah, well, what can I say? Yes, it is. And you know
That's
what?
the truth.
Even if you attune to this, how and I think it's really important for people to understand is that this is quite profound, that a child sees parents as God with skin on. So we've got, as parents, we have the right and responsibility to sow into them godly principles, because from conception to about the age of 7, they don't have the capacity to be able to analyze what we're saying. They're just like a sponge. So whatever we put in them, good or bad, is what's going to come out for the rest of their life. And it's a very powerful responsibility that we have as children, as parents. And it's also very powerful how we understand that we have godly principles. Now, we said at the start of this session is that I can't preach to parents to say naughty parents, because I was one of the worst ones. I walked out on my kids at the age of 4 and 8. I committed adultery and walked out on them and with it. So, for me, I'm not trying to hit anyone over the head with a big stick. I'm basically saying what we said at the start. Hey, don't do what I did.
Yeah.
Don't don't mess them up. And the kids are messed up as a result of what I did, of what I sowed into them. It was my responsibility, it was a godly responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So those that are listening, if they feel condemned because they made the mistakes, don't do that, because that's not what God's about. He will, ask forgiveness and he will forgive you. It's to bring conviction, but it's also to rescue those that haven't had kids. It's the awesome responsibility that God puts on us to raise the kids. And that leads us to the next thing there on the page, is that where it says, read the kingdom dynamics, parents responsible to raise children, which is from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. There it is, some of the things, and this is the page. That's the page you should see. This one here.
Yeah, I got it. Yep.
And so we have it's really showing there, just how important it is, and we just put the headings out there: an atmosphere reeking with destructive criticism, condemnation, unrealistic expectation, sarcasm, intimidation, and fear will provoke a child to wrath. And they wonder why their kids get to teenagers and they go off the rails, because it's the fruit of what we had sown into them. So it is it's just such a responsibility. And if you look around, and because I now know this stuff, and I'm obviously teaching it, I can look through that this is a filter, and God's word is the filter, to looking at that Christian families raising children that they're walking the walk, not just talking the talk, but they're walking the walk, and they're sowing into their children. And then I'll look at children that are coming from unfortunately a pagan background or a godless upbringing, and the kids are feral in relation. You can see it in their demeanor, in their eyes. That's not a fault of the child. It's a fault of the parents, not don't want God in their lives. So they're opening themselves up to the kingdom of darkness, and they're sowing into their children the kingdom of darkness.
Yeah,
with all its woke culture and all the other stuff that it is. And then they wonder why our society's gone off the rails, because our society that said, I don't need God, is now paying the price of children that are godless, rebellious. All of this, what we're trying to talk in here.
Well, we get in the society, as I see it, Carl, we're getting robbed of our parenthood through different organisations like churches and schools and stuff like that. And where there's a void, where there's a void, if God's missing, that void will be filled pretty quick with all this other rubbish that's going on.
That's right, and I think it's in this page here somewhere. It's not the responsibility of the schools and the governments and all that to teach our kids. It's our responsibility to teach them. And that is getting harder. And just what you're saying, that's getting more and more difficult for people, for Christians, to be able to want to bring their children up in a godly environment. It's a huge risk to Christians to put their kids in a public school system, because it's just full of demonic stuff that's going to get sown into them. And the pressure's coming, incredible pressure coming on Christian schools, because the government's trying to force them to adopt the worldly demonic principles into their schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know here someone that we disciple, that I have to walk through and disciple, her daughter, and this was all, she was going to a school called Wild Cherry, which is a new age school. It's real woke culture. It's part of the Steiner system.
Yeah.
And when she got the understandings and went through this, she realized that her child needed to come out of that environment.
Yep.
And she didn't realize just how toxic that environment, because that's like further the extreme than your public school. This is taken up to a whole new level. And anyway, she decided to investigate. She started telling me about it. And I said, well, go and have a look at the Christian school. So she took her daughter to the Christian school, and she's now enrolled in that. And her daughter is growing and blossoming. In fact, on a level of, your arithmetic, what we call it, arithmetic, what we call it, in writing, what we call it is in our language, writing arithmetic and writing or something. There was the expression we used to have as kids, as when we were going to school. But all of those basics, English,
Reading, writing, arithmetic.
yeah, reading, writing, arithmetic, that's the one. So all of those skills, she was almost a year behind at least, and had to play catch up in that. And she was shocked at how little and how poor the real stuff, the stuff that's important to them, was missing in this Steiner school, Steiner philosophy.
Yep.
It's all woke culture. It's all everything
Ideologies. Yep.
Yep. Terrible. And thank goodness for the child. As I said, the child is now flourishing and growing. She didn't really want to leave, which is, natural for any small child to leave all her friends and start a new one. That was a bit of a drama for her. But now she's actually thriving, and she can't believe how nice the kids are. She didn't realize the environment. And then this particular mother's gone back to that school and can't believe how, I suppose the word, I don't have another word, it's pretty hard, but how feral those kids are. They've got no principles at all. You know what? And, the parents are just don't realize what they're allowing to be sewed into these children. They're thinking they're doing the right thing, but they're not. They're doing them a massive injustice. And they're being indoctrinated with woke culture at warp speed. It's just terrible.
Well, I think that what woke culture, I don't subscribe to it, but in any way, but it's all about emotions and ideologies instead of before principles, before the basic principles, like the basic principles of life, of love, of everything. We've got to have an ideology imposed on us first, which drowns out those principles. Honesty, decency, to tell the truth.
Yeah, and also with that as well, what you're saying, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that expression. We have to have those basics. So they're becoming more and more illiterate. And even the education system is recognised. I mean, they're the cause of it, but they're even themselves going, "Oh my goodness, they're illiterate to what they are." And that's the fault of them. They've got to pick up the mirror and look in the mirror. All right, let's come back.
Well, can I just say, Carl? Can I just say, here in Victoria, as well as I do, our illustrious Premier has left his post. He's resigned. But the children are leaving school for climate change. The children are leaving school taking sides in the Palestine-Israel war, they can't read and write, but yes, they've got this worldly view, apparently. How they're going to fix this? So, they're best left at school, and a few principles and a bit of reading, writing, and arithmetic are doing well into the future.
Yeah. And the scary part is, Jared, is that's the future generation, the future leaders. And that's a scary thing. So it's the same thing that we've repeatedly said. If there's not a sovereign intervention of God to rescue mankind from its own stupidity, we're accelerating into a very demonically driven, we already are, it's going to get worse, environment. That's communism, socialism, humanism, all of the things out of the kingdom.
All the isms.
All the isms, that's right. So let's have a look at Proverbs 22:6. What a great expression. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. How appropriate is that into what it is? And, the footnotes, read out some of the footnotes there on Proverbs 22:6.
Wait a minute. I've got... The 29.
That's that page. The page with the lady, mum sitting on the couch with her daughter.
Page. $23, no, 22.6. We are to discipline promptly. Is that where I'm at?
Well, it should look for that
22.
imagery there, those images, Jared. Look for those images. Well, what I'll do is I'll read it out for the sake of time. So, here it is in the footnotes on, from the Bible we use in Proverbs 22:6. Train up has the idea of a parent graciously investing in their child whatever wisdom, love, and nurture and discipline is needed for him to become fully committed to God in the
Oh,
way he
sorry.
should go. It's
Yes.
so there. So it's train up a child as much as they can, drip feeding them the process, and it starts right from the very start.
Yes. Yeah. In a way, yeah, with natural tendency that he might
Yeah.
be totally committed to God in the future.
Yep. And then on the next page, you've got there, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 7 to 9.
Yeah.
What it says, you shall teach them diligently to your children.
Yes.
And it's like constantly reminders sowing into them godly principles.
Yeah, the
All right, so
imprint of
go to
God.
so obedience and discipline. This is a really interesting one. Let me just have a look. We'll walk through some of these pages.
Can I just say that I found very interesting, just going back a little bit in Timothy 1, when it says, when I called to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother and your mother, and I am persuaded it is in you also.
Yeah, so that's
it's a lineage, isn't it?
Let me just repeat it for the benefit of our audience. That's 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5. Yes.
Yes. It's a great verse. That one hit me.
Yeah, so it's a generational passing on down the generation.
It's a lineage, yes, of God coming through the generations. That's why the children are held in trust for him.
Yep.
And Timothy 1.
So I'm going to go on just over the pages, obedience and discipline. So I want to talk about those things.
Yes.
So obedience and discipline, that's probably about 4 pages there.
Yeah.
What did you learn? If you summed it up, what did you learn out of these pages with obedience and discipline?
Well, the obedience and discipline, the child, like teaching them right for wrong, but it must be done promptly and on the spot. Like it's not something you can delay. Like they've got to be able to associate the disobedience with the discipline. So it's that you must be instructive and inform the child soon as that. If you let it go, that the child is onto the next part of his life, forgotten everything. So he's forgotten to be if you've missed that or skipped it, that children hasn't received that love of that instruction not to do that, or that's not the way to go, or whatever. So it must be prompt. It doesn't have to be brutal. Done in a loving way.
That's right. Well, look at that there, the kingdom dynamics on obedience under Colossians 3, chapter 3, verse 20.
Yes.
While the worldly mind views obedience as constricting, God's word says that it is releasing.
Amen to that.
Yeah. And it's like kids at a pool, it's like I've just watched it as observations, is that because it's not what I necessarily did, but where kids are out of control, unruly and stuff, when obedience is brought into their life, it actually is good for them. It brings them back into alignment.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't understand that. They don't realize, oh no, I can't, and this is a sacred cow in today's society, I can't spank my child or whatever. But when you act, and we're going to come to that biblical in a minute, is that it actually, gives them boundaries and guidelines.
Yep.
And children that have been properly disciplined according to biblical principles, they grow up as good citizens in society. Whereas the ones that have just run amok, and we're seeing it now, they've had no guiding principles, no godly principles, or no godly discipline. They're just running amok because they got no boundaries.
Yep. Can I give you a crude agricultural analogy there that I've come up with like on the farm with dogs and horses and things like that.
Yep.
And if you've got a dog that you put a bit of time into, and it becomes not only handy and good and improve, but becomes your best mate because you put that discipline in. The same with a horse. Like I've trained camp drafting horses, and the work you put into them, they love it. They love it, and it all comes out of the discipline.
Yep.
To build out, to bring out their natural abilities.
Yep.
Where on the other hand, if you've got you may have a dog that's untrainable. Well, it doesn't get you the affection of the ones that has been disciplined properly and prepared to take that discipline.
Yeah. All right, so let's have a look at the types of discipline, and that's the kingdom dynamics on Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5. And it was page number 1821 in the Bible, but it's the types of discipline.
Yes.
And then also the following page with Hebrews 12, the footnote Hebrews 12, 5. There's quite 5 to 11. There's quite a lot of things there. And then Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24. There's quite good verses on these pages, which I'd like to bring and discuss.
Yeah, well, in the discipline in 12:5, it's got the chastening in the Greek means to instruct, and to rebuke in the Greek means to verbally reprove, and scourge. This is an interesting one. Scourge in the Greek means to flog, but not as it doesn't mean to flog your children or scourge, but it does mean to you're quite within your rights under God's law to not spare the rod.
Yeah, and that's where, and especially now your new age thinking and all that, oh no, we can't. In fact, in some circles it's illegal, right? Because there's excesses. So they grab the excesses and just go from one extreme to the other. So this was just probably one of the good examples, and it was my first wife and her father. And my first wife was a really good woman, and we weren't Christians or anything like that, but had good ethics and good child raising principles. And she learnt them from her dad. It was, it's one that's close to me and one that I remember. She would talk about the discipline, and this is what I want to talk about in here, because this is really important.
It is important.
Because let me just come back to present time. The same lady that I was talking about with her child in the Steiner school, when we got to this topic and I was verbally presenting the topic, and I'm talking about spank your child, the voices, I could hear the voices in her head. She wasn't saying it because you were just listening. It's because the way we teach with a one-way dialogue. But I could hear her inside, no, I can't hit my child. I could hear all this stuff. But when she went and studied it, she realized the biblical principles of how it's applied.
Yes.
So that ties back to my first wife and her relationship with her father. And it's just tied in with what you said. So when her and her sister were naughty, he would sit them down. He would make sure that he wasn't angry. So he dealt with that first. So he would sit them down and explain the error that they had made. and
Yeah.
he'd talk them through, and it's like what we're seeing in here in all of these pages. I mean, our listeners can't hear it unless they got those books, but it was addressing the issue. Now, do you understand what you did? You did this and blah, 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 and got them to understand it. But the outcome is that they knew they were going to get a smack on the bottom with his hand. But he walked and talked them through the error of what they had done and why he was going to discipline. And then also explained that he was doing, he loved them, he didn't want to do it, but they needed to pay. You know, you do that expression, you do the crime, you pay the time. You do the time. So I mean that's overlaying it in a sense. I'm just wanting to, so people understand what I'm trying to say. So I can remember my first wife talking about it. She'd say that was more painful than the smack on the bottom.
Yep.
And they remembered. They remembered why they were being disciplined. And then when he had discipline, he would give them a hug. That's a
Yep.
powerful way of discipline when you actually stop and think about it. All very well for us to sit back here in our armchairs at our age and talk about it. But what a great principle. And it's talking about what it says here. When you look at these pages, Proverbs 29, chapter 29, verses 15 and 17. The rod and rebuke,
absolutely.
wisdom for the child left. Eh? Look at it. The rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. Verse 17. Correct your son, and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give delight to your soul.
Beautiful.
And then Proverbs 13:24. He who spares his rod hates his son, but who loves his son disciplines him promptly.
Promptly, yes.
Like the
little tap on the bum is only the seal of the instruction.
Yeah. Yep. And it doesn't have to be that hard. The important thing is from the
instructions are key.
Yeah. And that's what, you're going into the next when the kingdom dynamics on Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24, guidelines for administering discipline. And it walks it through there, just what we're doing. We are to discipline we are to discipline properly. Just what you said, so that the child connects the punishment with the appropriate behavior. Exactly what you said. We're to discipline without anger. And that's Jeremiah 10:24. In the same way that God disciplines, the punishment should focus on the principle that the child needs to learn and the consequences of not following that principle. We are to discipline while there is hope. In other words, you've got to do it when they're young. If you wait till they're teenagers, too late.
No hope.
Yeah, the horse is bolted. And that's where people think, and they scratching their head wondering why when they become teenagers, they turn into absolute rat bags.
Yeah.
And go right off the rails because it wasn't proper discipline and principles weren't sown into their lives as a young person.
If they haven't got that discipline, they haven't got it. If they haven't got it young, they haven't got it to come back to. They can go on there on the wild track for a while and say, no, this is not what I'm taught.
Yep.
I know in my heart, in my soul, that I've got to. It's there, but if it's never been put there, they can't rely on it or return to it.
Yep. And then, then on the kingdom dynamics, on discipline as an act of faith from Proverbs 23:13.
Yes.
Again, discipline as an act of faith. It's just really quite, there.
Yeah, well, this is a great one here. In the same way, the discipline of our children is an act of faith in which we faithfully do what we can according to his word. I love this bit, and watch him exceed our works with his.
Yep.
Watch him exceed our works with his. Like, how good's that? Like, we put in a bit and he finishes it off.
That's right. Because we're abiding to it. And I think that imagery there of, the father with the son sitting on his shoulder, and you can see him clearly instructing him, it's just so important. I just love these teachings of what this is. I just think this is so valuable for future generations. You and I, we made the remarks at the start. We can't change. we can only teach those that are coming up behind us, the
Mm.
biblical principles. But I think that this stuff, that all these kingdom dynamics and stuff in this Bible is so well laid out, in how to discipline and raise our children, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And then your last one here is Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 11. It's your very last page. And there, because the
Yeah.
sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. That's
Yep.
exactly what we're seeing happening now, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's no discipline in our court system, in our schools, in our churches, whatever,
Yep. Yep.
Um, if it
And that's
feels
the
good, do
fruit.
it.
And that's the fruit of where our generation said we don't need God. And
Yeah,
as we en masse walked away from the principles that our parents and grandparents valued, which was
exactly.
Judeo-Christian principles. We took that out of society. Now we're seeing the fruit of what our generation did. No doubt about that at all. And I think this little imagery down the bottom with the babies,
Yeah,
with the babies
fitting the
bottle.
dummy, yeah.
That's
The bottle.
it's such a good one, isn't
That's a beauty.
it?
It's a beauty. No, we got a bit to answer to our generation, and I am so pleased to be doing this as part of reparation for what I didn't do.
Well, yeah, that's right. And the takeaway from this, Jared, is obviously I've dedicated the rest of my life for this, but to help disciple others, is that this is our responsibility, to
It
pass it
is.
on to you, but then you to pass it on to others,
Hmm.
and teach this next generation that's coming up to save them from the pits of hell or the destruction, self-destruction that they're doing out of their ignorance of God. Well, I don't need God. Well, if you don't need God, you open the door up to the kingdom of darkness. And we just see
Yeah.
that. If you look through spiritual eyes, that's what we're seeing around us.
Yes.
Well, that concludes this session. So I hope everyone has enjoyed that one. So that's
I
been
did.
very good. Our next topic is session 7, and it's called Power of Integrity. So that takes this whole thing to a new level. So that's our next topic, Power of Integrity.